Hi, we are having a conversation with Michael Strong. He is the author of The Habit of Thought and also CEO of Flow. Professor Strong, what is it so great about Socratic practice?
Well, Luis, I personally love learning this way, and I've committed much of my life to helping others learn this way. For me, it's important to come to my own understandings of what makes sense, what is true and what is not true. And so I left Harvard to go and study at St. John's, where they teach Socratically, because I don't want to repeat what somebody else has said. I want to make learning my own. And so I love the process of thinking and talking with other people about what's true and what's not, and how I can decide based on evidence and argument what's more true and what's less true.
And how does this work in the classroom?
We like to use a format where the students are seated in a circle, typically between 10 and 15, maybe 20. I've done more, but it's best not to go beyond 20. They've all read a text beforehand. Sometimes it's an essay or a poem or a scientific paper or mathematical proof. Occasionally it's a piece of visual art or music or an experiment. They've had some common preparation, and then the leader asks a question, an open-ended question about the text, and the students are asked to come up with answers, and they start giving their ideas of what might be the best answer to that question. And the leader's role is always to draw out of students better answers, more justified by the text, point out contradictions and things they're saying, and really get them to develop their own ideas about what the text is saying.
And who teaches the class?
The wonderful thing about it is the adult, the Socratic leader, is indirectly helping the students to learn for themselves. The way I look at it is, if somebody else is telling me what to think, I'm not doing the work. Whereas if I'm asked to come up with an understanding for which I'm responsible for defending my opinion, then I'm doing the work. For me, having somebody tell me what to think is as if I was an athletic coach and I did all the weightlifting. For me, as a Socratic questioner, if I expect you to come up with an understanding, I'm asking you to use your brain, so your brain does the work of coming up with coherent, intelligible, defensible interpretations.
Do the students resent the lack of guidance from the teacher?
Some students do, and some students love it. And it's one of those things where there are different personalities. There are some students where when I start doing this, it's as if they've been liberated from prison. All their life they've wanted to think for themselves, they wanted to have the opportunity to test their ideas against others, and they couldn't be happier. There are other students who are very angry and resentful because they believe that the teacher should tell them what to think. And I've had students in the midst of a conversation, when I'm not indicating what I think might be the best interpretation, say, "Tell us, which one of us is right?" And what I often say is, would you like me also to tell you what to believe in religion and politics and how to dress? Do you want me to control your whole life, or do you want to take responsibility for some part of your life? And by putting them on the spot, even though they don't like to be asked to think for themselves, most of them agree that they really do want to be responsible for their life and their thoughts. And although it's hard work, bit by bit, they accept the responsibility of learning to come to their own conclusions.
And how do you know that Socratic practice is working well in the classroom?
For me, it's a matter of serious engagement. One of the flaws that can happen is if students are just talking without really focusing or making sense. The text is crucial to getting them to focus. If students are just babbling without really being thoughtful, I will focus the conversation on a particular sentence or paragraph or concept and ask them to explain something very detailed. Conversely, sometimes the discussion can be very dull and academic, in which case I might ask them to apply it to their lives, to see how these ideas that are in the paper make a real difference in what happens in the world at large. So there's this balance between being too unintellectual and simply goofing off on the one hand, versus on the other hand being too academic and meaningless. So the ideal goal is to have them taking ideas seriously, thinking hard about how ideas make a real difference in what happens in the world.
Now this demands a lot from the tutor and from the students.
Absolutely. One of the reasons that I think I enjoy doing this, and a lot of people enjoy doing this, is it's fun to learn and think. Most people who go into education went into education at an academic level, whatever level, because they love to think about ideas, and yet they don't always have an opportunity. So you could say it requires a lot, but if what you really want to do is to think about how the world works, this provides an ongoing opportunity for the teacher as well as the students to constantly be thinking about different ideas and how they compare, what's a little bit more true, what's a little bit less true, and how ideas are built upon one another. For those of us who love to learn and think, it's the most fun we can possibly have.
And speaking of how the world works, I read that Socratic practice contributes to freedom and peace. How come?
Well, there are a number of longer stories there, but on the peace angle, we'll start with the peace. When you listen to different ideas, one typically becomes less dogmatic. Very often, if all of your beliefs came from somebody else and you were told what to believe, then you often believe that everybody ought to believe exactly how you believe. If, on the other hand, you realize that discovering truth is a long, hard process, and there are legitimate perspectives that may be different from your own, but still have good reasons behind them, gradually you see that we need to be tolerant of different beliefs. There's certain contribution to peace. With respect to freedom, one believes again that truths are discovered by means of the discussion of ideas, and in general, we improve our ways of doing things in the world by means of allowing freedom. Control, in Egypt, the Pharaoh was God, and the godlike Pharaoh had all of the people doing all the work as slaves. A little bit of an exaggeration, but something like that. I see Socratic practice as a continuation of the movement towards freedom, where we broke away from one leader controlling all of us to a world in which each of us is responsible for developing our own individuality and simultaneously respecting the individuality of others.
Okay, thank you, Professor Strong. Thank you very much for sharing this with us, and thank you very much.
You're welcome.